Good evening, and welcome to the October 15th, 2024 meeting of the Portsmouth Zoning Board of Adjustment. The first item of business is approval of the September 17th, 2024 meeting minutes. Does anybody have anything to say about this?
Yeah, I've got something on page 5 of our packet, or that's of the meeting. It's page 8 of our packet. At the end of the first paragraph at the top, it says, so it was not a variance for the building permit, but it should read for the building footprint.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to add?
Oh.
Yes, Mr. Metzen?
Yes. The other one is on page 6, page 9 of our packet. At the last sentence, it says living room area, but it should just say living area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good. Yes. Is there a motion to accept with these amendments?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The September 17th minutes are accepted. The next item of business is approval of the September 24th, 2024 work session minutes.
I will abstain from that vote.
Any changes, any suggestions? A motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, so item A, new business, item A, is a request to postpone. Is there anybody who would like to allow this to happen?
I will make a motion. I'm sorry, Tom, did you have
No.
I'll make a motion to approve the postponement to the upcoming meeting, October 22nd.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Okay. All
I was just going to say, I read the applicant's note as to being out of town. I think a 1-week extension is reasonable.
Okay. As do I. So I guess we'll really vote. Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So we will see them next week when we'll all be back here.
Oh,
You won't.
I will
Next
not.
week. Okay, I was not. The request B, item B, the request of Sharon Sarek for property located at 47 Langdon Street, requesting relief to construct a sunroom on the rear of the existing structure, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow 43% building coverage, where 35% is the maximum allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 138, Lot 29, and lies within the General Residence C District. Mr. Graham is recused from this discussion. Is there anyone to present to us tonight?
hello, good evening. My name is Tom Basselier. I'm here with my wife Sharon Sarek. We live at 47 Langdon Street. And we're looking for this variance exception to build a sunroom, as you say in the application, along the back of our house. It's going to be tucked into an L-shaped section that was formed by additions over the years on the house. If you look at page 4 in the packet, picture numbered 1, you can see a brick patio that approaches our back door, and that's the area where the sunroom would be built. The original house, which was built in the late 1700s, had an addition sometime after that to extend the house back, which resulted in that L shape. Since then, there have been interior alterations by previous owners that have added a back staircase to get up to the house. The original staircase was one of those from the 1700s that you barely could fit your feet on. It was the only way to get to the second floor. But what that has done is left the back section of the house virtually unusable as living space. and that's the reason we're looking to do the addition. So we're asking for a building coverage variance so that we can create the sunroom, which gives us a little modern living space in the back for our growing family. We have 2 children and grandchildren in the area. So along with the application, we've included other pictures of abutter properties, our backyard, a survey, plot plan, and an architect's rendering of the addition. The packet also includes letters from several abutters in support of the project. So if there are no questions about those statements, I can move on to the variance criteria. So number 1, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. The addition will not alter the essential nature of the neighborhood or threaten public health, safety, or welfare in any way. The addition is not visible from the street and doesn't affect any setbacks that already exist on the house. Number 2, the spirit of the ordinance will be observed. The addition doesn't interfere with any adjoining properties' views, their property use, or privacy on their lots. And even with the proposed addition, our lot still has about 25% open space where only 20% is required by the ordinance. Number 3, substantial justice will be done. We feel even with this addition, the lot has a lot less building coverage than many properties in the area. The neighborhood's characterized by lots that exceed building coverage and have structures that encroach on setbacks. I included the tax map section for our area on page 9, and you can see that especially in our particular block right there off of Langdon Street. The public doesn't realize any gain by denying the variance. The addition is modest, it's in good taste, and keeps with the character of the neighborhood. In fact, there are multiple homes in the area directly visible, and some of those pictures are in the packet as well, that have additions on the back of their homes. On number 4, I'm going to try to turn the page here. Value of surrounding properties will not be diminished. Again, we feel the addition is designed to be tasteful. It's only 1 story. It'll integrate nicely with the existing house because of how we have it tucked back in there, and will only improve the appearance of our house, and we feel the value of the properties that neighbor it. The 1-story design fits into the neighborhood, which has, as I said, a mix of older homes of various sizes and some newer homes that were built and replaced older homes over the last 5 to 10 years. And number 5, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. We feel that denying the exception would mean we couldn't fully utilize our home, and we could not use a substantial section of it without destroying the character of a very old Portsmouth home. Given the age and its configuration, the addition will allow us to rectify that situation. It's reasonable in size and function, and so for those reasons, we feel like the exception should be granted. So that's the end of what I had prepared to say. Welcome any questions on the packet.
Are there questions for the applicant? Yes, Mr. Neese.
I have a question. It might be between the applicant and the staff. I'm not sure which. The site plan that you have shows that the area of the lot is 4121 or something like that.
Correct.
The staff memo says that the lot is 3,920. And I'm just curious why there's a discrepancy. It's relatively minor. With a 4121, it's 43% lot coverage. With a 3920, it'd be 45% coverage. So I don't know that this is a red flag, but I just want to make sure we know what we're voting on.
I believe I took the area from the tax card. I don't see an issue with it as it's the more conservative number. But that's for the board to decide if they wanted to change that to increase it.
I have a second question. Could you just elaborate a little bit on how the staircase in the L makes a lot of that space unusable?
So the addition that was put on the back of the house, try to refer you to, let's see, there's a Yeah, you can't see it in the diagram. The back staircase that was added took what was about a 7-foot wide by 15-foot long room in the back and reclaimed about 8 feet of that so they could build a staircase that goes up to a landing and up to the second floor. So it encroaches on that back room quite a bit, leaving a very, very small space that you really can't put anything in but a couple of small chairs.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
So I think my question might be for city staff. The lot coverage, does the existing lot coverage include the patio, or is that like under 18 inches?
So it's under 18 inches, so it wouldn't count towards building coverage.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, if nothing else, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against? Okay. Public hearing is closed. What would you like to do? Yes, Mr.
Well, I'm prepared to make a motion, but I'm a little nervous about the lot coverage number. Do we need to say anything about we approve it, whether it's 43 or 45% coverage?
It might be wise to put a condition on there that says that the dimensions articulated in the plan are truly what you're, sorry, lost my words, are truly what you're approving. So what the building coverage ultimately ends up being is not, it's not like they can go bigger than that. Does that make sense?
The problem is the notice says 43%, and if it's 45%, it's more relief being asked for?
I thought that so the notice is 43% based on the smaller lot coverage. So if it's a bigger lot coverage, then the building coverage would be smaller. Correct?
That's how I understood you.
Yeah.
Yes, 43% lines up with 4121 square feet. The staff memo has 3,900 square feet, which would be 45%.
But it still says 43%.
But the staff memo still says 43%.
Sorry, I'm confused.
I know my head is,
So, according to your calculations, the 43% lines up with the smaller area or the larger?
Larger area.
The larger area, okay. I would err on the side of what the site plan says, and I'm confident in that. It could just be an error that I took the wrong area.
How about if the motion referred to 45% coverage, up to 45% coverage?
I think you can only do as advertised, which was 43.
Oh,
But
we always
the
have a plus
advertisement
and
didn't
minus.
mention the 3,900, so you don't need to, you can just give the 43 if you make that motion, and it's consistent with as advertised. So even though 45 would be more relief, it seems like that's not what's needed.
Is the lot area part of the advertisement?
No.
No.
Okay, then I think we're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Solomon.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes, please.
after all that, I move to grant the variance for the application as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mantle.
If I may, I'll address the criteria. Granting the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. There's no impact on health, safety, welfare, or light, or light and air, excuse me. It observes the spirit of the ordinance in that there's no change in use, light and air is preserved. These two are commonly looked at together, and I think my comments are meant to apply to both of them. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. There would be no benefit to the public by denying this variance. There would be considerable harm to the applicant if we were to do so. Will not diminish the values of the surrounding properties. No evidence has been presented that it will. There are several abutters who have spoken in favor of the addition. Arguably, if there was concern about property values, they would argue against it, and no one has. With respect to literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in a necessary hardship. The property has several special conditions that distinguish it from other properties. It's a small lot, which many of the properties are in this area. It is, of course, bigger than the 3,500 square foot, but not by much. The old structure on the lot has been altered in such a way that at least part of the living area really isn't useful to the applicant. The location of the structure and the shape of the sunroom means, and the limited to one story means it will have little impact on the abutters. It won't be noticeable from the street or from one side at all, and several of the properties in the area are similar. There's no substantial relationship between strict adherence of the ordinance and the purpose of the ordinance and specific application to this property.
Does the second have anything to add?
Nope,
Okay.
not at all.
Is there any discussion before we vote? Okay. Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Ms. Margerson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
I'm a no on this one.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You are approved. Okay. The next item of business is C, the request of Garrett R. Merchant, owner, for property located at 33 Harrison Avenue, requesting relief after the fact for the construction of a shed which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.573.20 to allow a 3-foot rear yard and 5-foot rear side yard where 9 feet is required for both. And 2, a variance from section 10.521 to allow 22% building coverage where 20 is the maximum allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 251, Lot 16, and lies within the Single Residence B District. Is there anyone to speak to this application?
First, I want to start with saying thank you for meeting with me today. And I also want to say I want to apologize for starting this process after the fact. The shed is already existing on the property. When I purchased the shed from JD Sheds, I'd asked the salesperson if I needed any permits. Unfortunately, I trusted the salesman who said the only permit I would need would be in the historical district and that I would be, quote, all set. When I was picking the location for them to drop off the shed, 2 out of my 3 neighbors all had 2 of my neighbors had a shed in the corner where I put the shed. So now 3 neighbors have a shed, 1 doesn't. I received a letter today that my neighbor who doesn't have the shed said it was okay. He said he emailed it to you, but if you don't have a copy, I can provide that. Sorry, I wasn't aware I was going to be talking. I requested that the shed be placed in that location to mimic how the neighbors' sheds were spaced so that it would look uniform. The shed, I already said that, it's a 10 by 12 pre-made shed, and I began the permitting process as soon as I was notified that I would need a building permit. And then I applied for the building permit, and then they told me I was over my usage, so I'm requesting a variance to get that 22%. And also with the location, which I was notified that I was in the wrong location. I require the shed to store a lawnmower, snow blower, weed whacker, and other yard supplies. For the last couple of years, I had a tarp shed, which I did have a picture of on there. That's it was really ripped up. There was a tarp flapping in the wind. It actually destroyed my old leaf blower, and then a water pump that I needed on my property. And would you like me to go across the criteria? Is that the next part? So 10.233.20, in order to authorize that the variance meets all criteria, the variance will not be contrary to public interest. The shed is the color pine right now, but I'm waiting to get the approval, if I get the approval to paint it, because I don't want to put more money into it, but the shed will be painted to match the house. The location is the same as my neighbors who have similar sized sheds, so it matches the neighborhood aesthetics. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. Granting the variance on the land use and location of the shed will not impact the ordinance. It mimics the location of my neighbor's sheds. Substantial justice will be done. The shed allows for us to have a safe, dry, and secure spot to store our outdoor equipment, kids' gear, and toys. That will also ensure that my lawn is clutter-free. The shed is brand new and is much more appealing than the tarp shed that was falling apart. The values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. The shed does not affect any of my neighbors. 2 out of my 3 adjacent neighbors have sheds in the exact same location. Their sheds do not affect me, and my shed will not affect them in any way. I believe that my neighbor's property value will not be diminished in any way, as the shed allows me to have a clean, tidy lawn space. I have discussed the location of the shed with one of my neighbors who has offered to write a letter. At the time I wrote this, I had only talked with one, and then one of my other neighbors actually provided me with a letter also. Literal enforcement and provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. I need this shed for safe and secure storage so that I'm not wasting money repurchasing outdoor power equipment every year due to damage, rust, etc. And it's also already in place, and it would be very difficult to move at this point.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. We did receive a letter with our packet. Letters.
Was that one from Janice? Sorry.
Yes.
Because Janice was
Sure, he has to come.
Yes, it is. Anybody?
Public comment?
Oh, gosh. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? Is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against? Okay. Public hearing is closed. Anybody? Thank you, Mr. Mattson.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance request as presented. If I get a second.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Taking the first 2 criteria together, the variance is not contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. This backyard shed does not conflict with the purpose of the ordinance, and it won't alter the essential character of the neighborhood the other neighbors also have backyard sheds in very similar locations, and it doesn't threaten public health, safety, or welfare, or otherwise injure public rights. The next one is substantial justice is done, and here we're weighing that the benefit to the applicant should not be outweighed by harm to the general public or to other individuals, and there is no reason to see how this backyard shed harms the general public or other individuals, whereas it clearly benefits the applicant. For the next one, the values of surrounding properties are not diminished, and again, there's no reason to think that this new shed for backyard storage would diminish the surrounding property values. And then number 5, literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship, and here this is a relatively reasonable use to have and want a backyard shed, and there is no fair and substantial justice no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance and the specific application to this property with placing the shed in a back corner similar to all the neighbors, and it makes sense.
Thank you. Mr. Ram, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So Really, I mean, I think the setback, admittedly, the applicant is, somewhat less than what's required for the 9 feet, but forcing the applicant to move the shed out by 4 or 5 feet in, a couple different directions really is not worthwhile. I think perhaps the more difficult one is that the current building coverage is currently at exactly 20%, which is the allowed. This does put the applicant over by 3%, but I do think that is somewhat mitigated by the fact that I think the hardship and kind of the unique characteristic of all this is that the applicant has pointed out that other properties that are similarly, sized in terms of overall lot coverage also have out sheds, and they're also placed in the same basic location that the applicant is looking for. And I do think that kind of constitutes like a unique mini neighborhood here that within that context, I think kind of does create a hardship that the applicant is simply asking for something that the neighbors already have. It has not proved detrimental to the applicant's property or other neighboring properties. So adding this additional shed in that location, not worth making the applicant move it into a more awkward location on the property, and the 3% being over, I think, meets all the criteria.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that this is a relatively short shed that essentially functions more as a fence, which there are also fences in these yards. And it almost seems like, in a way, despite this being a request for after-the-fact variance, it probably arose because the applicant was trying to do the right thing and actually pulled the building permit, which then triggered the request for the variance. So I think the intentions were good here.
I agree.
Yeah. I'll just say one more thing about that too as well. Hopefully you were able to provide some feedback back to the JD sheds, although salespeople will always tell you what they think you want you to hear so that they can make a sale.
Yeah.
Just for the record.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
I hate to be a negative Nelly tonight, but I will not be supporting this motion. I know it's going to pass. If I thought it was going to be close, I'd probably say something a little bit different. But since it's not going to be close, I will note that it shouldn't be presumed that just because an error was made that there will be a variance after the fact. The zoning ordinance is a publicly available document. Anyone who's planning, anyone else out who may be looking at this meeting and is planning and thinking about putting a shed or any other structure on their property should be aware that the expectation will be conformance with the ordinance, and they really should check the ordinance before having the work done. I think that responsibility falls upon the property owner as well as maybe even more so than the contractor. So had that been done, a 10 by 10 shed placed 2 feet farther away from the back, the rear yard probably would have accomplished the same thing for the property owner and would only have required the building coverage exception or variance, which is probably be pretty easy to get. So anyway, for those reasons, I will not be supporting the motion.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, then a yes vote allows the shed. Mr. Neath?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
No.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So, you have a shed. Thank you. You're welcome.
No, he has an approval for the shed. He doesn't have to move the shed.
Okay, so the next item of business
Good point.
is D, the request of Northeast Credit Union and Liberty Mutual Insurance Company owners for property located at 0 and 100 Borthwick Avenue, requesting relief to perform a lot line adjustment, which will expand the parking lot, which is an existing non-conforming use on the lot, which requires the following. 1, variance from 10.440 to allow a surface parking lot as a principal use where it is not allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 259, Lot 15, and Map 240, Lot 3, and lies within the Office Research District. Is there someone to speak to this petition?
Good evening. My name is Jeff Kilberg. I'm with Apex Design Build. I'll start with the introduction, although that was a good introduction as well. Lot 243 is a 10.74 acre lot on Borthwick Avenue in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It's currently owned by Liberty Mutual and is utilized solely as parking lot. This lot was built in conjunction with the original Liberty Mutual building, and it serves 225 Borthwick Avenue. The lot line adjustment here covers a portion of lot 25915, which is currently leased by Liberty Mutual, and it was designed and engineered by Liberty Mutual as well and constructed in the early 2000s. Obviously, the existing lot was split or bifurcated by Borthwick Avenue. It was in 1969 that this happened, and that's the reason for the non-conforming use currently. As discussed, we're requesting relief from 10.331 as well as 10.440. 10.331 allows a non-conforming use to continue, but such use may not be extended, enlarged, or changed except in conformity with this ordinance. And then the applicant is obviously proposing that lot line adjustment to expand 243's primary use as a parking lot, which is not allowed in 10.440. So the 5 variance criteria, I'll run through those. So waiving the terms of the ordinance will not be contrary to public interest. One, the essential character of the neighborhood will remain intact as is. And 2, it won't threaten or cause safety or welfare issues in that current area. This is a office research zone that is not changing from its current use. It's utilized as parking, and it will remain as parking as well. Deviation from number 2, I'm trying to scroll here. Deviation from strict requirements in the ordinance is consistent with the spirit of the ordinance because basically the facilities around the area were designed and master planned to promote economic development and loading. This requested relief simply allows the applicant to redraw the lot lines while maintaining the existing necessary parking services for their office building. Granting the variance would do substantial justice because basically denying the variance will harm the applicant in the attempt to consolidate the existing parking areas. It serves to no public benefit in its current use, and therefore no injury of the public will be granted or will happen due to granting this through that process. The value of the surrounding property will not be diminished as we've talked about. This is all current office research zoning. So we're not going to change the use. We're not going to add anything to that space. Generally, the abutting properties are city-owned and impervious to market fluctuations. And last one, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship for these 2 reasons. Basically, this property, as we talked about, was bifurcated by Borthwick Avenue. And as a result of that, it's a very unique situation that doesn't typically come about. We're not asking to change the usage here, but it would prevent basically consolidation of the lot for Liberty Mutual. It's a reasonable request because parking is a necessary item, and the fact that it was separated during the expansion of Borthwick Avenue creates a very unique situation in this case. If there's any questions or concerns, happy to answer.
Are there questions for the applicant? Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So interesting description, I guess. So originally, just to fully understand what you're saying, originally you're saying that the Liberty Mutual building structure was created and the associated parking lot that's currently on the map 240 lot 3 at 0 Borthwick Avenue was all one lot at one point in time?
That's correct. So in 1969, it bifurcated and created two separate lots.
Okay. And then how did the additional parking lot come to be on a neighboring property?
There was an agreement put together between Liberty Mutual and Northeastern Credit Union. And obviously, Northeastern Credit Union is selling the property. The new owners will utilize the property for something completely different from a banking institution. And so that's access parking, which is not needed. So Liberty Mutual, as they expanded, needed that parking space, but obviously did not have the lot to build it on. Came to an agreement with Northeastern Credit Union and created a lease, which allows them to just probably cover basic maintenance costs associated with the parking lot.
Okay. And then looking at your lot line adjustment plan, sheet number 1, it's page 65 of our packet. It does look like you intend to maintain the current access to the parking lot. There's a discussion of a proposed easement across the other existing Northeast Credit Union / Lighthouse.
Yep.
With that name, property.
Correct. So the existing entrance to the parking lot will remain unchanged, but as a lot line adjustment occurs, we will have to create an easement associated with that to provide proper access for Liberty Mutual to that newly owned portion of parking lot.
Okay. And I guess it's probably more of a question for the planning board, but just out of curiosity, what is the reason why you just didn't simply write the property line to include that easement area so that you had your driveway and your parking lot?
To be honest, from the standpoint of creating an existing parking lot that's still utilized for the future of what is Northeastern Credit Union building, if we created we'll call it a bifurcation in this situation, where we created a lot line that extended and included that, then we would need an easement for usage from 100 Borthwick. So you're kind of flipping it into a different scenario in that situation. We still need the parking lot accessibility. That there's like a small sliver of parking lot on the south side there.
Okay.
We still need access to that for 100 Borthwick and the future usage.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Rossi, your hand was up.
So the plan right now is simply to change the lot line, no change in the pavement for the parking areas.
Yep, that's correct.
So I'm a little confused, just looking at the balance of, benefits to the public and benefits to the property owner. Can you just describe again what is the benefit to Liberty Mutual for getting this change?
So the parking lot was originally designed, engineered, and constructed by Liberty Mutual. So it gives them rightful ownership to that portion of that parking lot. So that's obviously one benefit from that standpoint. They currently utilize it, and I don't know if anybody's been through there. Their signage that depicts the differentiation between Liberty Mutual's parking spots and then what is Northeastern Credit Union's parking spots. They built a bridge even to access this parking lot from their abutting parking lot in the early 2000s. So it gives rightful ownership from that standpoint to something that they've been leasing through that process, just given the arrangement that was put together with Northeastern Credit Union. So it's more of just assigning rightful ownership to their parking lot rather than continuing to pay a lease over time.
Let's see. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mattson.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask why this is happening now, but I guess it seems because Northeast Credit Union is changing hands, or.
To be honest, I can't answer that because I don't know.
Okay.
But I would assume because there was an existing agreement in place and that lease had been extended once, it was probably that didn't want to go through the process of getting a variance for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would assume in that situation.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. The public hearing is closed. And it's back to us. Yes, Mr. Mann.
Madam Chair, I'd move to approve the application as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
That was, sorry, Mr.
That was
Rayum and then
Mr.
Mr.
Mattson.
Mattson.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'll just move right into the criteria. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would be observe the spirit of the ordinance. In some way, this is a little tricky in the sense that this is really not something that's recognized by the ordinance as being a primary use. But that said, there is a logic, I think, to allowing this to be purely used in its expanded form. So it currently is non-conforming. Really, the applicant cannot expand upon that. But in reality, it's already there. The facts on the ground are that the applicant has built a parking lot, has created it through this lease arrangement, is now looking to simply change that to being a ownership relationship. So I think, in the sense, the essential characteristics of the neighborhood that are what is currently on the ground is this is an open industrial area that this has been used as parking for this other adjoining property that once upon a time was actually part of the original property. And this would be less of an argument if that division of the lots, which was done essentially for a public purpose of extending Borthwick Avenue to connect it all the way out to Route 33, making a logical extension and allowing further economic development in this area. The applicant, created, by doing that, it was created two separate lots. They're now simply looking to expand upon that. So I don't think there's anything there that's out of the characteristics of the general neighborhood area. It's a long-standing use. And fundamentally, it is accomplishing what the ordinance is trying to do. Under most normal circumstances, we wouldn't allow it. But because of these unique circumstances, I think it is something that the ordinance doesn't necessarily see, but is something that really meets the fundamental desire of having sufficient parking for a use that really doesn't have any other parking because, again, its parking was segmented off from it at one point in time. Granting the variance would do substantial justice against, that's our balancing test of the public's interest versus the applicant's. So the applicant's interest here is to take advantage of this opportunity to have all of their parking on one property so they can get out of this lease situation, especially with the potential change in ownership of the neighboring property. Kind of leaves them in an uncertain set of circumstances where they've had a long time relationship. There's really nothing that the public would have for an interest in this to see something put on this piece of property other than the existing parking lot that's been there for a long time that supports a business that is beneficial to the city overall. So I think that balancing test weighs in the applicant's favor. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, this highly industrial district, sort of continuing that industrial use. It's a long-standing arrangement. There's really nothing on the ground that is changing in this circumstance. Is really just simply a property line and a somewhat of an expansion of a use on a particular lot, but not necessarily for the overall neighborhood. And then lastly, the hardship here, again, I think the essence of the hardship the applicant has put forward is that this lot was essentially separated many years ago as a benefit to the city. The applicant agreed to do that, but that created a non-conforming lot. They have had a lease situation in place for a long period of time, so there is a long history here. The applicant is simply looking to change the lease arrangement to a ownership arrangement. So with that, that's a special condition. There's nothing in the general public purposes that would outweigh what the applicant is noting here as the kind of the unusual set of circumstances for the property. And it's a reasonable use. The parking lot has been in place for many, many years, has successfully supported a business that has also been in the city for many, many years, and therefore I recommend approval.
Does the second have anything to add?
I'll just add that for me the big thing is that nothing is actually physically changing, so that's a big factor. And then just that this got triggered by the way the ordinance was written, which the stuff in the ordinance was meant to prevent other negative situations that doesn't apply here.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion before we vote? Okay. Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Bayham?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You are approved. The next item of business is the request of Kent and Jennifer Bonnewell, owners for property located at 332 Hanover Street, requesting relief to demolish the existing primary and accessory structure and construct a two-living unit structure which requires the following. 1, variance from Section 10.5A 41.10A to allow A, 2,167 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit where 3,000 square feet is required. B, a secondary front yard of 17 feet where 12 feet is the maximum. And C, a finished floor surface 6 feet above the sidewalk grade where 36 inches is maximum. Said property is located on Assessor Map 126, Lot 43, and lies within the Character District 4-L1. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Chair and members of the board. My name is Brett Allard with Shaughnessy Allard. I'm the attorney for the landowners, Kent and Jennifer Bonnewell, who own the property that was just introduced at 332 Hanover Street. This property is located in the CD4-1L Character District, situated at the corner of Hanover and Parker Street, and at the corner of Parker Street and Tanner Court. So it is surrounded on 3 sides by public roads. The existing property is about 4,334 square feet. It's got about 60 to 65 feet of frontage on each of those 3 public streets I just listed for about 180-ish total feet of frontage. There is a sidewalk and a retaining wall along the edge of Hanover Street, which is relatively new. I think that was built by the city back in 2019 or 2020. It's currently improved with a single-family dwelling that fronts along the Hanover Street portion of the lot. Based on the tax card, that tells us that the house was built around 1910 or so. And there's currently a shed out in the rear portion of the lot, as long as 4 parking spaces along Tanner Court. You can see the shed there in that picture to the bottom left. There's also some lawn and landscaping beds, sort of open space, as you run up and down Parker Street, which connects Hanover and Tanner. What we're proposing is to remove the existing single-family dwelling and the shed and construct a new 2-family dwelling and an improved parking layout to go along with it. By removing the shed and reconfiguring the parking area around the building, we'll be able to pick up 2 additional spaces. We'll have 4 exterior spaces and then 2 interior garage spaces. Just to briefly go over what we're asking the board to approve tonight, this character district requires us to have 3,000 square feet of minimum lot area per dwelling unit. We're requesting a variance to permit 2 dwelling units on the lot having a little over 4,300 square feet. So we're providing, if you break that down into its subparts, 2,167 square feet per unit, where 3,000 is required. That's the first variance. The second variance, we're required again in this character district to maintain a max secondary front yard of no less than 12 feet. What we're requesting is to maintain 17.4 feet of non-building area between the southerly edge of the building and the southerly lot line along Tanner Court. And that's mostly to alleviate some of the existing on-street parking that folks are experiencing in the area in terms of congestion. So that's the open space that we'll be maintaining for those additional parking spaces that I mentioned before. In order to support what we're proposing as a 2-family dwelling. We do have only 3 spaces are required, and we are going to maintain 6. So I think that's a good thing. That's variance number 2. Variance number 3 is that the finished ground floor surface above sidewalk grade shall be no greater than 3 feet. we are requesting a variance to permit the new building to maintain finished ground floor surface of 6.3 feet above sidewalk grade out there in the front along Hanover Street. And that's mostly just having to do with the natural topography of the land. It slopes down grade as you run from Tanner Court towards Hanover Street. Our existing right now is 6.2 feet at the sidewalk above grade, so we're only going up 1/10 of a foot, but it's an increase nonetheless, and it triggers a variance as a result of that sort of inherent restriction of the land. I did read some of the comments that were submitted from the public and posted on the website this morning, and I thought it'd be prudent just to take a quick run through things we are not requesting relief for. So we're not requesting relief for anything having to do with the demo. We did receive a demo permit last Friday. We're not requesting relief for a two-family use or a two-family or a duplex. Those are both permitted by right in this district. And we're not requesting relief for the size of the building or in terms of it being too big or the type of roof or the building height. And specifically with respect to building height, the max building height is 40 feet above the average grade plane. And if you look at the zoning ordinance, the way that it states that you measure that is it's calculated around the perimeter of the proposed structure using existing grade points up to the mid-slope of the roof. And so based on how we're required to calculate max building height, we are currently at 25 feet, and we're only proposing to go up 29.4 feet. So we're still 10.6 feet under that maximum threshold. And interestingly, even if you were to measure it from the lowest elevation on the lot, which is that Hanover Street parking, Hanover Street sidewalk, to the peak of the roof, which is going further down and further up more than we have to how we're actually required to measure it, we'd still be under 40 feet. It'd be at 39 and change. So, that's all shown on sheet A5 of the McHenry architecture design plans that have been submitted. There's a good elevation on there which breaks down pretty much everything I just said, with those arrows in the middle going both from the average grade plane to the mid slope of the roof, as showing that 29.4, as well as the sort of belt and suspenders approach in terms of at least demonstrating compliance with building height, talking about going from lowest elevation to peak, all of which is under 40 feet. My client did did consult with the neighbors, share this plan with them. I think that's a good thing for folks to do. Some of the feedback we're hearing is essentially that the building is too big or too tall, or that this is going to set a precedent for future applications. As I just said, we would submit that it's not too tall. We don't need a building height variance. It is compliant. And I think some of the comments are sort of conflating density and building size. So the size of the building is not what triggers the density variance. It's the size of the lot that triggers the density variance. And in fact, we need the secondary front yard variance because we're not building the lot as big as the zoning ordinance would like to see by building it out towards those sidewalks. So it's interesting that we know we need a density variance to have 2 units based on the lot size, but actually a second variance to not build it out as big as otherwise, the zoning ordinance might like. So in terms of that, I think it's pretty clear that the density issue needs to be looked at separate from some of these other sort of considerations. But in any event, New Hampshire law is clear that variances don't set precedent. So, I don't think that's a concern that the board needs to have. Obviously, these are all taken on a case-by-case basis based on the uniqueness of every particular lot. So with that, I'd be happy to, unless there's sort of any preliminary questions about the background or why we're here or what we're asking for, I'd be happy to answer those questions now. Otherwise, I'll dive into the variance criteria.
Go on to the criteria, please.
Number 1, I'll do number 1 and 2 together. Granting the variance will not be contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. For a variance to be contrary to the public interest, the proposal has to conflict with the ordinance so much that it unduly and in a marked degree violates the zoning ordinance's basic objectives. And as this board knows and has already heard tonight, the relevant tests for that are whether the proposal will alter the essential character of the area or threaten public health or safety. The courts held that these are very closely related, so for purposes of brevity, I'll do them together. With respect to the secondary front yard setback variance, we are preserving 6 parking spaces to support that two-family dwelling, reduce on-street parking burden in the area. We're proposing to build along most of Hanover and Parker Street where that's currently grass and landscaping. So that's consistent with the character of the district to activate the sidewalks and facilitate sort of that dense urban walkable character that this character district is aimed at achieving. By expanding the building area along these two streets, we're actually eliminating existing nonconformities with respect to those secondary front yard setbacks. Similarly, the front lot line build-out is about 60 to 80% required. We're proposing to bring that from 43.5% to 77%, so another nonconformity that will be eliminated if the variances are granted. Same can be said for the side setback, which is with respect to the only lot line that does not abut a public street. With respect to the lot line with 324 Hanover Street, that's currently required to maintain 5 to 20 feet on that side setback. We're bringing it from it's currently 1.2 feet from the side setback, and we're going to be at 7.7. So that's another nonconformity that's going to be eliminated if the variances are granted. With respect to the finished ground floor above the sidewalk grade, again, this is really due to the natural grade change in the slope. Not a whole lot we can do about that. We're proposing 6.3 feet, which is consistent with what you'll see a lot out there in this area of Hanover Street with that retaining wall that the city built, just based on the natural topography of the area. And again, we're only going up 1/10 of a foot. Density, again, to loop back to density, it's required due to the lot size, not the building size. We don't think allowing 2 units here will alter the character of the area. 2 families aren't allowed and encouraged use on the site. This lot is larger than a lot of other properties in the area, so we don't think we're going to see any undue overcrowding or congestion or anything like that. And in fact, what we laid out and what McHenry has laid out in their design plans, if you look at the sheet that A2, which talks about the density analysis, there's 33 properties that we looked at here in this area. Only one of them is conforming to current density requirements. And what we're doing is proposing 2,167 square feet per unit. That's more than 20 of these 33 properties that were analyzed in the immediate vicinity, more than they provide overall for however many units they are providing for on each particular lot. Of those 33 properties that were surveyed, 6 of them are 2 families, and those range from 1,900-ish on the per unit on the large end, down all the way to 872 square feet on the smaller end. So if the variances are granted out of these 33 properties that were surveyed in the immediate vicinity, we'll be providing the most square footage per unit among those 2 family lots in the area. So for all those reasons, we don't think granting the variance would alter the essential character of the area or threaten public health or safety. Number 3, granting the variance would do substantial justice. As this board knows, that's a balancing test between public and private rights. We're not seeing any injury to the public here if the variances are granted, or a gain to the public if the variances are denied, really only loss to the applicant. There's going to be a good revitalization effort here, improvements to the property. That's a benefit to the public and to the applicant. And we think that the variance is appropriate for the area, and the balancing test favors the applicant in this scenario. Number 4, the values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. If the variances are granted, the lot will remain consistent with the residential character of other lots in the area, such that there will be no adverse effect on surrounding property values. Again, maintaining that parking, I think, is a big thing. I think that's a good thing. Will go a long way for the area. again, eliminating a number of those nonconformities, not to repeat myself, but the build-outs on the front lot line, the side setback, the two secondary front yard setbacks, all nonconformities that'll be eliminated to bring us further into harmony with the zoning ordinance. And we are, again, staying under that max building height by more than 10 feet, 10.6 feet. So we think that surrounding property values will not be diminished. Number 5, unnecessary hardship. As the board knows, the first step is to take a look at the special conditions of the property, as I described in connection with the chart that's still here on the lot sizes. This lot is much bigger than most others in the area, particularly on a square footage per unit basis. And again, we're proposing more square footage per unit than 20 of the 33 nearby properties overall, and more than all 6 of the nearby two-family lots. And this lot also maintains a sizable parking area in the vicinity of where we're proposing to expand it slightly. That's a good special condition to support this proposal. And it maintains all these unique features, notwithstanding the fact that it's sandwiched between 3 public streets. I thought that was a special condition of the property. And when I read the staff report, I noted that staff also agreed that the property is unique as it has 3 front yards and 1 side yard. So owing to these special conditions, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose and application of the zoning ordinance subject requirements here. Again, we need the density and secondary front yard setback variances, but granting them isn't going to produce any sort of overcrowding or congestion, not going to increase the burden on on-street parking in the area. The two-family dwellings in this district aren't allowed and encouraged use. Eliminating all those nonconformities, not a whole lot we can do about the sidewalk elevation, but again, that is negligible and consistent with what we're seeing for folks out there. Again, coming in under that 10-foot, more than 10 feet under that max building height requirement. And interestingly, if we were to, the way I've sort of conceptualized sort of the scale of this project is, if we were to eliminate one of the units, propose a single-family home, expand the footprint so we were further towards Tanner Court, and increase the building height by 10 feet higher than what we're proposing right now, we would actually only need 1 variance instead of 3. That would be a more conforming proposal, I suppose, which is really underscores the distinction between density and scale of the building. It's not the density, the scale of the building that triggers the density, it's just the size of the lot. But we think by shrinking the building a little bit, it'll allow for the parking to support the density. It does trigger those extra variances for the secondary front yard setback, but I think cohesively, it's a good plan. It's a viable plan. It's not a gross deviation from the terms of the ordinance by any stretch of the imagination. And we would respectfully ask that the board grant the variances. And beyond that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Other questions for the applicant? Mr. Mantle.
A couple. On your density survey, of the 25 lots that are currently in CDL 1 and 2, 4, 1, 4, 2, how many had this condition prior to the zoning change?
I'm sure a number. I don't know exactly what the numbers are. If one of our folks who's here at from McHenry.
No, I see the 33. 25 of them are in the CD4. How many of those 25 existed prior to the CD4 zoning?
How many of the lots?
How many of these density models that you show prior to the CD4 zoning change?
We did not break that out, but I'm sure a number of these lots are old and grandfathered.
Okay. What's the square footage of each of the units?
Unit A is 2,359 livable square feet. Unit B is 2,047.
2360 and 2047?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all.
That's all? Okay. Ms. Marchison.
Yeah, so the uniqueness of the property is that it has 3 front yards and 1 side yard, correct?
I believe that's one of the special conditions it has among many, yes.
Okay, and how does that relate to the variance for the lot area per dwelling unit?
there's sort of a package deal. I guess with respect to that special condition, that relates more to the variance for the relief from the secondary front yard component. I think based on the fact that it has 3 front yards, secondary front yards, we're a little restricted there in terms of balancing the need for off-street parking, but also, achieving the sort of max lot coverage build-out that the ordinance is trying to obtain. So I think with respect to, I think that specific special condition plays more into the secondary front yard variance than perhaps the density ones. But I think there are other special conditions here that are more relevant to the density one. So I was trying to sort of speak generally rather than parsing them all out. But.
Okay, and so then I'll ask, with the permission of the chair, for you to go through what are the special conditions for the density?
Okay.
So for the special conditions for the density, it really has to do with the lot size, because density is about lot size. And I think this comes back to our density survey here. And granted, yes, a lot of these lots are old and grandfathered, or perhaps other ones received density variances, or, more likely is some combination of the two. But they are all on the ground. They all are what they are, and they are, they are what constitutes the current makeup of the area. So based on that current makeup of the area, this lot is much larger on a square footage per unit basis than all the other lots in the area. Well, most of the other lots in the area, more than 20 overall, if you look at regardless of how many units. And it's going to be larger on a per square footage basis than all 6 of the other 2 families that are out there currently. So it's the lot size, I think, that ties more into the density variance. And then just to follow the line of thought along to the third variance, we need the sidewalk. That's an inherent restriction of the land in terms of the topography, the slope that comes down from Hanover to, from Tanner to Hanover, that all these sort of lots out there just have to deal with. So 3 different special conditions tied to 3 different variances, but I think they're all there.
Just one quick follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So the lot area is about 1,400 square feet over what is required, the minimum for the CD4L1. But isn't it true that you could demolish this house but put a single-family home in, and you would not need that variance?
Correct. And if we built a bigger home than we're proposing right now, but only called it 1 unit instead of 2, we could actually alleviate the secondary front yard setback as well. And all we'd be left with is the sidewalk elevation that we can't do much about, which again brings me back to distinguishing between density and lot size and scale of building.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Neese.
Thank you. You've made a point of emphasizing how this lot is larger than many of the lots in the area that have multiple units on them. And as a result, your ratio of, I want to get this right, lot size to units is actually going to be bigger than many of the others. But section 10.233.50 of our ordinance says that whether surrounding properties violate a provision or standard shall not be a factor in determining whether the spirit of the ordinance would be observed by the granting of the variance. So I'm a little confused how you can make this argument that we're doing better than the others, and that helps to justify this, and this sort of shows that it's consistent with the spirit of the ordinance, given this explicit language in the ordinance that we're not supposed to consider that.
I was only drawing that conclusion for purposes of the hardship criteria, not for spirit of the ordinance.
Well, in your letter, it's included in the spirit of the ordinance section.
No. I mean, a lot of there's a lot of overlap among the criteria. They sort of all work together. To really drill down into it, if we're talking about nonconformities and lot size vis-a-vis others in the area, I think that can be unique for purposes of a finding of hardship under criteria 5, while perhaps not as relevant based on that zoning ordinance language under spirit of the ordinance, which is more about character of the area and public health and safety. It's tied into the first criteria, which is the public interest prong. So, yeah, I think that is it. I think it needs to be compartmentalized, and that's what I was trying to do. And to the extent that wasn't clear in the written materials, I do apologize for that.
Any questions here?
I'm sorry, I'm still having a hard time grasping the logic of the hardship as it applies to the to the area per dwelling unit. You have an oversized lot per the ordinance, and how does that translate into being a rationale for not being conforming with the square feet per dwelling unit? It just seems like inverted logic to me.
I think the hardship standard is owing to the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from others in the area. There's
Yeah,
no.
I know that. I know what the hardship criteria are. So tell me again, what is the special condition that militates that you cannot enjoy this use of this property without this particular variance reducing the number of square feet per dwelling unit relative to the requirements of the ordinance? I'm just not seeing it, so I need a little help.
Well, yeah, respectfully, the test isn't whether or not we can enjoy it. The test is whether, owing to the special conditions that distinguish from others in the area, there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose and application of that requirement here. That's not to say my clients couldn't enjoy a single-family home, a bigger single-family home on this lot. They certainly could, but that's not the test. The test is, what are the special conditions? And with respect to density, we're saying, look at this whole area around it, which is what you have to do to distinguish special conditions, and look at it on a square footage per unit basis. If you look at it on that basis, this lot is much bigger than all of the others in the area, or at least the overwhelming majority. So that's a special condition, and we don't think there's a fair and substantial relationship between the purpose and application of the density requirement here, because the purpose is to minimize overcrowding, minimize congested development. But if this variance is granted, those problems aren't going to manifest themselves here, because we do have sufficient space for the second dwelling unit. We do have sufficient space for the off-street parking. We're not seeing any sort of creation of overcrowding or congested development here if a variance is granted to allow a second dwelling unit, particularly where, as I've said a number of times by analogy, we could make it a single-family dwelling, build the property way bigger, eliminate the on-site parking down to 3 spaces instead of 6, and that would be a more intensive use of this property. That would increase the burden on off-street parking in the area. It would increase lot coverage. But it would actually be more conforming. So that, in a sense, is a little inverted. It's a little bit of a tricky situation that folks find themselves in with this character-based zoning sometimes. But essentially, density is a means to control overcrowding and congested development. This lot's different because it's bigger and can support a second dwelling unit. And if the variances are granted, we don't see any of those issues coming to fruition.
Mr. Graham. I'm sorry, Mr. Rossi, are you?
Yeah, no, that's okay. I have some things I'm thinking about, but I'm not
Mr.
clear
Brown.
enough to perform.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So CD4L1 zoning district, kind of unusual. It's sort of to this one neighborhood. It covers 25 properties, of which you've cited the statistics for 22 of those 25 properties, although a quick look at the zoning map shows that the remaining couple of properties that you haven't cited probably not terribly different. So on sheet A2 of your packet, it's page 86 of our packet that we have on for tonight. You kind of show there the 22 out of the 25 properties, only one of which meets the 3,000 square feet. I guess from your perspective, when the city created CD4L1 in an attempt to, replicate what it saw as the general character of this zone, do you have any concerns with how the city ultimately decided upon the 3,000 square feet?
Do I have any concerns about the city determining that 3,000 square feet should be the number that is assigned on a per unit basis? So you need 3,000 square feet per unit?
Per unit for the CD4L1, based off of what you did for your research here.
I guess I haven't thought about it as sort of a macro perspective like that, or a sort of, was this the right call back in the day when the district first was created? Our focus has been more along the lines of what's on the ground now and how do we compare to it, because that's the most relevant analysis for a variance. In terms of the more macro philosophical, I guess I don't really have an opinion other than maybe 3,000 square feet seems a little high, particularly given the surrounding density in the area. But that's why you folks are here, to grant variances for situations like this when it makes sense, and to operate as sort of the relief valve from burdensome regulations like that when it's justified, and when the harms that are intended to be prevented are not going to manifest themselves if the variances are granted.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in opposition to this petition?
My name is Daphne Chaveris, and I've lived at 40 Parker Street for over 20 years. I live right across the street from 332 in a modest, small New England-style home, approximately 1,400 square feet. And though I'm excited about the redevelopment of the property across the street from me, it has the definitely the potential to enhance the look and feel of our community. I do have concerns, though, regarding the proposed building height and density, especially given its proximity to Parker Street. The scale of the building feels overwhelming for the area, and the increase from 4 to 16 windows facing, actually it's 5 windows that are facing Parker Street, to 16 windows facing Parker Street raises privacy concerns, creating sort of a fishbowl effect. I kindly request the height of the building and the number of windows facing Parker Street and overall size be adjusted to better align with the character of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition?
Hello, my name is Bryn Waldwick. I live at 30 Parker Street with my wife and son. It's kind of kitty corner to the new development. And I think what we're most against is sort of the culmination of these factors together. I think it's the having 2 units there creating a much wider building, having the mansard roof kind of takes away the open air versus a peaked roof, and then having very high floor heights ends up with the new building being, the peak of the new building is 7 feet above the peak of the existing building and many of the surrounding buildings. Speaking just to our property, the views out the 3rd floor of our house, we can see out starting from the Foundry garage. We can see a portion of the Piscataqua Bridge. We can see the trees in the Union Cemetery and a portion of the pylons of the Sarah Mildred Long Bridge, and as well as kind of looking out over Bridge Street and Maplewood and a lot of the new development that's happening in the area. And as proposed, this plan pretty much blocks out both the bridges and everything in between them. It turns to just looking at sky. So for us, emotionally and also it seems financially, it is hurting the value of our property to have the culmination of all of these together. I don't exactly know how to draw the legal lines between the variances and what I just told you, but the height of the front door has something to do with it if you want to think of all the heights adding together. And the fact that it's 2 units has something to do with it because the building is much wider than it would ever otherwise be. And then speaking more generally, I think as proposed, it's out of the public interest to grant these variances because the eventual plan is not really necessarily in character or proportion with the existing neighborhood. Seeing like more and more of the buildings kind of get redeveloped into larger buildings and wider and sort of modern proportions next to the proportions of the old buildings creates a situation where everyone who's maintaining the old buildings feels like you're kind of loomed over by the new construction. And making 2 units that are this large on the lot next to all these houses that are 7 or 8 feet shorter, you lose, the people in the older houses lose light. You sort of lose privacy because you feel like people are looking down in, and you lose the feeling of the neighborhood as it has been kind of like a quaint feeling. And I think that as proposed, it doesn't really fit in with the character of that and fit in with a lot of things that make the neighborhood good. And it feels like it will incentivize more and more people who are maintaining the older houses to either stop or just sell it to try to redevelop it. And the neighborhood will eventually lose all of the things that make it great, that make people want to move there in the first place. And this is like incredibly uncomfortable. I didn't look forward to having to speak about it this way, but I sort of feel like in some way, when you move there, you're a steward of the neighborhood and all of that history, and that's why I want to ask to try to make the buildings a little bit smaller to fit in proportion with the existing buildings before I want to speak in support of granting the variances that are requested. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition? Anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against? Okay. Public hearing. Oh, did you want to speak to, for, or against?
Can I just have 30 seconds for a rebuttal?
Yes, you're allowed to speak during this time.
Thank you. And I'll be very brief. But with respect to the comments that, they're asking for a 2-family, and because of that, there's a lot of windows, or the scale of the building is too wide, or the building is too tall. I think that's just simply, respectfully, not the case. We don't need variances or relief from this board for windows or the scale of the building or the height of the building. And actually, the only relief we need from this board in terms of the scale of the building is because we're not proposing to build it big enough. We're not proposing to build it all the way to all of the streets like this character-based zoning would like to see. And like I said, if we were to propose a single-family dwelling, if we were to try to eliminate asking for as many variances as possible, we would go to a single-family dwelling. We could go 10 feet higher than we're proposing, and we could go 10 feet wider than we're proposing. So these variances are to allow us to build a less intense structure and use than the ordinance would like to see.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Rossi.
Thank you. This is more or less a hypothetical question, because I take your point about not requiring a height variance with this structure. But as you can see, it's part of what is creating some concern within the neighborhood about property values. And I know massing is not really one of the things that we're looking at here in terms of the volume of the structure. But anyway, is it possible to build the structure lower? Like, could the front door, could the first floor actually be lower? Because I'm looking at the side view here, and I don't see any windows like real close to the ground. What would happen if you made that a little bit lower? Is that possible?
I'm going to defer on to our architects on that question.
Can we just quickly discuss that with our client real quick? That question?
Fine.
5 seconds.
I think we need to continue with our meeting, please.
Richard Desjardins with Portsmouth Architects, formerly McHenry Architecture. After briefly speaking with the property owner, they'd be willing to readjust the 6.3 foot variance that we're requesting to decrease that height to become a little bit more inclined with the I did. Oh.
I'm sorry.
Probably more complicated.
I will ask 2 for against when he's finished again, okay?
Okay, so, I mean, I guess I could just wrap it up and let them speak.
Okay, that's up to you.
But what I briefly touched on with them is that they're willing to bring that 6.3 to match the 6.2, which currently exists, which the first floor elevations would align.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against this petition?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Bonnywell. I'm one of the homeowners with my husband. And the question was whether we would move the door so that it could be the same height as our current front door, I think, which is only 1.5 inches, which, yes, we could do. But I don't think that would change anything on the variance, because I don't think we're asking for a variance on the height of the front door. So, but we could do that, sure, if that would make them happy.
No, that wasn't actually my question. My question was really more, could the whole structure be lowered somehow? You know, like just lowered a little bit farther into the ground? Do you really need that for 6?
Right. I mean, we have to pick a floor height, and so eventually the floor becomes the floor. Because the variance isn't for the ceiling, though, how does that change this particular?
If the floor height was, let's say hypothetically, 1 foot above the front sidewalk level, and the whole structure would be 5 feet lower, and
Right.
it would alleviate some of the neighborhood concerns about the looming nature, or whatever you want to call it, of the structure. Is that possible or not?
So if we move everything down,
Correct.
then we can't put a garage up there. Because we have to drive in the back. So we already put as many steps as we could without railings indoors, because when you put the garage in, you have to drop down at least a little bit. But if you drop more than, like we chose 3 steps or 4 steps, whatever that is, after 4 steps for code, you have to put in more railings, which we didn't want to have to do. So we did drop it as much as we could, but because of the garage situation, we'd probably have to rethink, I guess, parking is sort of the problem there. You know, we really do want to be.
I'm not trying to get you to do a whole redesign on the
We are
fly.
trying to be really accommodating. We thought our house looked really nice. Our neighbors were super nice to us when we met them. All of them smiled at our faces, and they were super nice. They even wrote in nice emails, and then apparently changed all their minds. We're really shocked. I'm so disappointed. I really hope we still get to do this, but I don't know if there's any other questions.
Are there other questions?
Thank you.
No, thank you. Last chance. 2, for, or against? Okay.
Hi, I'm not sure if this is incredibly useful, but another way to reduce
Could you
the height.
tell us your name again?
Oh, sorry,
just for
Bryn
the
Waldwick,
record?
30 Parker Street.
Thank you.
I'm not sure this is incredibly useful or not, but another possibility to move the building down is to lower the height of each interior floor. They seem like they're quite big in the plans. Our house is 3 stories with a mansard roof. It's right across the street. Our floors are 9 feet, 8 feet, and 7.5 feet, and I don't necessarily think it has to come to that, but there's definitely some wiggle room between our floor heights and this building that we see there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. 2, for, or against? Okay, the public hearing is closed. What would we like to do? Mr. Matson.
Yeah, I have a comment. Something I was thinking about is that, I mean, clearly this lot being surrounded on 3 sides by public rights of way is unique about that. And I guess I was thinking it does somewhat apply to the relief for the duplex because, basically these density things are related to light, air, and privacy. And if instead of having neighbors on three sides, it has streets on three sides with neighbors on the opposite side of the street, it's further away. And this structure would be further away from the one side yard that does have a neighbor, an abutting property, the only abutting property. So that was just one thought I had.
Okay, thank you. Second, yes. Ms. Marchison.
So my two thoughts are, I think that this application really struggles on the hardship criteria, and that by the applicant's own admission, they would not need any variance except for the grade thing to build a single-family home. And I think the other problem with this is that the character district really was intended to encourage development that is compatible with the established character of its surroundings and consistent with the city's goals for the preservation or enhancement of the area. And I think that this particular application really runs afoul of the spirit and intent of the ordinance. And I think the biggest problem is hardship. I don't think that the slightly larger lot really saves them from that.
Anybody else?
I have to say I agree with that.
Mr. Russell?
I'm struggling to see the hardship for the 2,000 some odd square feet per living, per dwelling unit. It's just not there to me.
Mr. Ram.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So, breaking this up into two pieces, because I think there are two pieces here. One is the setback variances that the applicant is looking for, as well as the height relative to the sidewalk variance. I think those were all pretty straightforward. I think that there's probably some general agreement with those. Certainly, this is one of the very unusual set of circumstances, which is created by the fact that this is in one of our relatively new character districts, something that the city has been experimenting with not even really a decade now, about a decade or so, trying to help better define, as Ms. Margison noted, to create a zoning area that is more reflective of the overall characteristics of a certain neighborhood, as well as to perhaps incentivize moving towards a future vision of what that neighborhood could take a look like, right? Which is true of all of our zoning. We have both what is currently there, but we also have perhaps some visioning of where we think that the neighborhood could potentially be heading into. So in terms of those setbacks, this is kind of the unusual set of circumstances with this. This zoning actually envisions you taking up the entire lot, essentially, with your proposed structure, if you're putting a structure on it. Which is kind of it's very different than what we normally see, but in fact what's being asked for relief is permission to not occupy the entire lot. It's to occupy less than that, and I think perhaps this is certainly, as the applicant has pointed out, one of the larger lots that's covered. Of the 25 lots that are covered by the CD4 L1 district, it is one of the larger ones. So in some sense, maybe the CD4 obviously it was our best intent to try and grasp what the outcome should be. This lot is a little bit bigger and sort of invites a larger structure overall. However many units that structure contains, it certainly invites someone, if they wanted to tear down an existing structure, which in this case the applicant is proposing doing. It's kind of unusual in that it was a structure that was set all to one side, was a typical two-story with a full attic New Englander. So I think all of those, the fact that it's bordered on three sides by roads, so essentially has three front yards, and the topography of the lot, I think all lends itself toward the idea that those variances are probably more or less acceptable, and that we probably don't want to encourage the applicant to make an even bigger structure out of what they're proposing doing. They are actually moderating that more than what the zoning ordinance would not only allow, but in some ways encourage them to go and do. So the second piece comes down to this lot area per dwelling unit. And again, I point to page 86 of our packet, and I think the applicant did a pretty good homework where they went and showed that they picked 22 of the 25 lots that are covered by CD 4L1. The one on the corner of Bridge Street, and then there's 2 more that are between Hill and Hanover that are not covered here. But if you look at the general characteristics of those, I would say they are not dissimilar from what the applicant has pointed out here. And all of those numbers, I mean, essentially they've shown that even outside of CD 4L1, that all of the numbers are not really compliant to what the zoning ordinance is asking for, pretty much across the board, with the exception of one property. So they happen to own the second property that in this case is greater by some substantial margin than what the ordinance would call for. The one other one is just barely beating it at 3,050 square feet. So I think there is, in a sense, we use this term hardship. I always think that's kind of like a poorly named thing. It's really not a hardship per se. It's what is there about this lot that says that strict application of the zoning ordinance doesn't make sense. So again, here you have probably, as the applicant has pointed out, one of the larger lots with just a single structure on it across the street is the Hill Street, which has like 4 units per building. Let's see, 12, yeah. So 12 units in all, scattered over 3 buildings. There's density here, and the applicant is asking for something that is, in my mind, fundamentally similar to what the general characteristics of the neighborhood are, that the zoning ordinance maybe perhaps doesn't fully capture that. I do think there is a hardship here in the sense that they have one that falls just shy of allowing 2 units, but at the same point in time is closer to meeting that standard than many of the neighboring lots that have a pre-existing condition within the zoning ordinance that the city only relatively recently created, giving it sort of their best shot of how do we sort of capture what's here. We pay consultants a lot of money to go and do that. So I don't know. I just have a hard spot with the idea that something that is such a broad characteristic of all the other properties in the same zoning ordinance and saying somehow because you happen to have the largest one, you are going to be penalized for that doesn't make sense. And I also, again, I do think the applicant has a point where, I understand the applicant, the neighbor's concerns. I empathize with them. I had a neighbor who built an addition on their property, added 4 new windows that were driveways width away from my house. It was not pleasant. It was not something I wanted to have happen, but at the same point in time, it was allowed by the zoning ordinance, more or less. From what I learned of that, it got me to become a zoning board member, for the record. But it does happen. It's not something that's controlled by our zoning ordinance necessarily. The amount of windows that are facing you. In terms of height, the ordinance is kind of encouraging taller buildings in this area, certainly across the street. There's taller. We do know that the CD5 district, which is even more intensive, currently applies to a property that's sort of cat-a-corner. The city council is trying to change that, but that's the current situation. So there is just sort of this thing in play of saying, you know what, we do recognize that being close to downtown, that there is an increase in the overall height. Yet with that, the applicant is trying to make their building lower than what the maximum is allowed. I mean, could they go and redesign it a little bit more? Perhaps. I don't think, again, Ms. Marchson often brings up, it's not our point to be their designer. It's to accept the design as it is. I recognize the neighbor's concern that, hey, I might be losing some of my view shed from it. Again, view shed, on very rare occasions, you get view corridors that are captured as a deed restriction. Those are usually, very valuable and paid for to get that. In general, your view is not guaranteed. And in this case here, also, talking about property values, again, our criteria for the property values really relates back to what is it of the variances that are being asked for that would negatively impact the property values, not necessarily what the structure is that is allowed by the ordinance that is proposed to be built. I also really hate when applicants, bring up, hey, what are all the alternatives? I could, do this and I could do that. But at the same point in time, sometimes the way that we sort of frame some of these discussions of, well, why are you doing it the way you're doing it, kind of sort of invites some of that negative pushback of, hey, I could do this other thing. To me, I'm going to be sad to see the existing home go. That's already happened in the past. We've had, applicants come before us, used to be a decade ago when they came before us, they sort of said, oh, the house is falling apart, and showed us pictures of the falling apart foundation. Now, nobody even bothers with that anymore. Just like, yeah, I want to tear it down, I want to put this new thing up. Is that the right thing for the city overall is another bigger question, but again, this is what our zoning ordinance currently calls for, what the state law calls for. I just find it hard to say that we can't approve that. Over.
Anybody else? Yes.
Well, I guess I would just disagree with a lot of what Mr. Williams said in that the zoning ordinance, the character district specifically, was designed to not allow for that. Not necessarily in demolition, but it was for the preservation enhancement of the area. I also, I do not think the lot is larger than the rest of the CD4L1. However, if you look, there's on page 86 of our packet, A2 of the applicant's submission, there are many properties that are much smaller in lot area than the 3,000 feet. I still think that there is a problem with hardship. I just don't think that the minimal, that the about 1,300 square foot increase in the lot area is that significant. So.
Yes, Mr. Neese.
Yeah, I just want to make one quick comment here. At least I'll try to be quick. We're acting like these homes on Hanover Street are the only part of CD4L1, but they're not. I mean, CD4L1 stretches, it's kind of strange, in my opinion, to be calling it an area because it's scattered all over State Street, Middle Street, and it has a number of lots that are larger than this one all over the place. So I just think we got to be careful about saying there's only 25 lots in CD4L1. That's the number that's near this property, but there's others scattered all over. I don't know what their relationship is to area and units. Looking at some of them, I think they're small because they seem to be big apartment buildings, but I don't know that for sure.
Agreed.
When I first saw the building in the application, I thought it was a terrific design. I really loved it. But I am also having problem, given that this is a character district, and while that's sometimes a troublesome and confusing designation, in this case, I do believe that this building changes that character, and I don't think that I will be able to approve it. Even though it meets, I know it's not overly tall. There is something about that mansard roof that makes it seem particularly larger and more there than the other buildings in the neighborhood. So for me, I don't think that I can approve this. Oh, yes, Ms. Marchison.
I think I'll try a motion. We'll just see how it goes.
Yes.
If that's okay. So I would move to deny the variance as presented and advertised. If I get a second, I'll speak to my motion.
No? Okay, Mr. Moore.
I'll second.
Okay. So I believe it fails on a few criterion, but however, I think the criteria, but I think the most essential is section 10.233.21 and 10.233.22, that granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest and would observe the spirit of the ordinance, and I find that it fails on both of those. As I indicated earlier, the purpose and intent of the character-based zoning is to encourage development that is compatible with the established character of its surroundings and consistent with the city's goals for the preservation or enhancement of the area. This is accomplished by providing a range of standards for the elements of development and buildings that define a place. I believe that since the application includes the proposed structure, that is something that we have to consider, particularly when we are talking about the character-based zoning that in which this property sits. So for those reasons, I would move that we deny the variance request.
I know I second it, and I support it. I really have no problem with the request is for a variance, but there are 3 separate variances listed, A, B, and C. I really have no problem with B, the secondary front yard, 17 feet where 12 feet was maximum. If anybody knows me, I have an issue with the city zoning on corner lots. The C variance, the finished floor surface 6 feet above the sidewalk grade or 36, that's the lot. You can't change that. It's the slope of the building, and it's the slope of the lot. So B and C I have no problem with. A I do. And even though I have it right here, the CD4, CDL4?
CD4L1.
CD4L, yeah. Thank you, Brian. I was part of this discussion when they were doing this part of Portsmouth, coming off of the old North End and Hanover Street and all of that. And it's a transition neighborhood. The original request, because it was an established neighborhood, tiny homes, small lots that flowed into downtown. The original request per square foot was to go from 3,500, where David's familiar with because that's where he's lived, to 2,000 to have, because there were already small lots, they wanted 1 unit per lot, 1 unit per lot, 1 unit per lot. They thought that leap was kind of big. The planning apartment, because that was the original, because 2,000 square feet would have put a lot of these things in compliance, a lot of the lots. So the discussion went from that to dropping it only 500 square feet, but allowing 2 families. I'm like, okay, fine. So I think the request is problematic. I don't enjoy hearing anybody saying, well, if we don't do this, we can do this, and it's going to be a lot bigger and a lot more impactful, a lot more intense. Well, never was a big fan of the carrot and stick approach. So I will support Ms. Margins' motion.
Is there discussion before we bring this to a vote? Yes, Mr. Mann.
Yeah, I'll just say, as I indicated, I won't be supporting it. And again, I think actually some of the history that Mr. Mann will refresh me on, I think reinforces that really the concern was less the total 3,000 square feet comes from increasing from 2,000, which would have made the applicant fully compliant. The concern being that multiple unit buildings could be created. Again, the applicant is simply looking to create a 2 dwelling unit building, which sounds sounds in agreement with what some of the original thinking was that went behind the zoning ordinance. And I will agree with Mr. Neese that CD401 does cover a number of the properties as well. I was kind of indicating how it was applied to that one specific neighborhood. Although I do think those other properties do share a lot of the characteristics with the neighborhood, I cannot say for certain that they would be fully reflective of what happens in the micro neighborhood.
Discussion?
I think this is a tough one. I think part of the problem with one of the limitations of our zoning ordinance is, I think, maybe it was Beth who said there's something about the mansard roofs that seems to throw people off. And it's really just because of the volumetric impact of squaring off the roof as opposed to having a peaked roof. Obviously the volume of a rectangle is a lot bigger than the volume of a triangle of the same base and height. But nonetheless, that's what our ordinance allows, along with kind of an odd way of measuring building height. So, you end up with these big structures. And it often, it has often occurred outside of character zoning districts where we have really no jurisdiction to think about those sorts of design aspects and whether or not they fit in with the rest of the neighborhood. But I do think that in this particular district, given the intent to preserve the character of the area, that is problematic. So I find myself in support of the motion to deny.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that the actual, bigger picture thing with character districts is getting away from looking at uses and making it more about buildings complying and then having more allowed uses within those buildings. That's kind of what the character-based zoning stuff is. And, this building, it seems like there's more of an issue with the use of two-family home than the structure. But I guess everybody has made their mind made up, so.
If I could add one other thing, I think, we're often asked to consider a chart, a table of numbers such as the ones we've seen with number of square feet per dwelling unit and the number of residents, but it's really hard to reduce the character of a property to one number. I don't really think that cuts it. There's a lot of other factors that came up during the discussion, like the fact that many of those properties have structures on them that were built long before the zoning ordinance was in place, and we might expect different level of compliance when a structure is raised and a completely new structure is being built on essentially a well, I don't know if it's proper to call it a greenfield, but it essentially has been made into a greenfield lot where there's every opportunity to comply with the zoning ordinance, and the comparison to these older structures that are non-conforming but predate the ordinance has its limitations in terms of the applicability of that logic.
Yes, Mr.
I got a question for Steph. Considering this is a CD4L character district, staff were presented with architectural drawings. Were all of those in compliance with all the CD4L design standards?
Yes.
Okay.
Are we ready to vote? Remember, the motion is to deny. A yes vote denies the application. Mr. Neese?
No.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Ms. Marchison?
Yes.
Mr. Varum?
No.
Mr. Rossi?
Reluctantly, yes.
Mr. Mattson?
No.
And the chair votes yes. So you are denied. This does not feel good.
No, never doesn't.
All right. We have come to the end of our agenda this evening. I am happy to say I will see you all next week.
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Yeah, not everybody.
Motion to adjourn?
Are you going to be here next week? I'm sorry, can we just go on to new business just officially? Are you going to be here next week? I'm sorry, I didn't hear
I'm
you.
a maybe.
You're a maybe?
Yeah, but
Okay.
you're not going to be.
I'm a no.
You're a no, then I'll be here.
I will be recusing on one of them next week. I'm in a butter.
Okay. Okay. All right, then,
Motion to adjourn?
second. We're adjourned. We're finished.